Greetings and welcome to the Dangerous Gentleman podcast. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. One of the things that I've heard over the course of my life is that your past gets you to where you are, but it doesn't determine where you go from here. Before I dive into that, I just want to talk a little bit about what's happened since I released the last podcast. I've had several people that knew me during that time, and they knew me and they knew my ex-wife, and they were actually part of that story, reach out to me and express, first of all, that they remember that, and they express some sorrow about that time and how sad it was to watch me and her go through that. And they also expressed how proud they are of me to see how far I've come and how I've changed and worked through my life. And they asked if I've heard anything from her, and I haven't. I've had a few text conversations. The last one was maybe 3 years ago. Other than that, I haven't heard anything from her. Neither have her parents, really. I think once or twice over the course of the last 3 years. Her sister hasn't heard from her. But there were a lot of people that remember walking through that with me. There were several people. Tom and Jackie used to pick me up at the mission, take me to church. Tom would take me to lunch when I didn't have any place to go. Brianna and her husband offered me a place to stay that I blew by doing some stupid stuff. My friends Ashley and James were there, like whenever their door was open if I needed to talk, which I didn't really take them up on because I was being kind of a dick, honestly. And so to those people, I'm sorry. I thank you for being there, and I'm sorry that I was that way. One thing I'd like to express is that I've talked in the past about how explanations are not excuses. And like our past can explain our actions, our horrible childhoods, our traumas, our experiences, and those kinds of things. They can set certain patterns and certain ways of thinking in our head that are difficult to overcome. And so I'm not going to tell you the specifics of my ex-wife's story. I don't know that that's my place to tell. At some point I may get into some of it, but it's not really my place. But I will tell you that she had some things happen to her when she was a child that could give her excuses for her behavior. Not excuses, sorry. I don't like to use that word. It could explain the behavior that she exhibited. It could explain how she treated me and how she treated other people and how she treated our children and how she treated herself. It explains that, the abuse that she inflicted on other people based on how hurt she was, the things that she experienced when she was a child. Again, I'm not gonna get into the specifics of that, but your past gets you to where you are, but it doesn't determine where you go from there, right? Regardless of what happened to her, regardless of what happened to me, I don't get to use that as an excuse for current behavior. I don't get to use the way my father treated me as an excuse for how I treat my children or how I treat society. I don't get to let that person who talked mean to me when I was a kid, that teacher who maybe spanked me or whatever, I don't get to use that as an excuse to be an asshole. That's weak. That's weakness. And yeah, you have to acknowledge those things. Sure. Right? Some crazy messed up stuff happened to me when I was a kid. Who doesn't have crazy messed up stuff happen to them when they're a kid? I don't know of anybody. It might not be the same level of crazy stuff like what I went through may seem tame to most people compared to what my ex-wife went through. I'm not going to say that mine was worse. I'm not going to say that mine was better. I don't think there is such a thing as better or worse. It's just your story, and how you deal with it is up to you. I've known kids, I've known people who had the best childhood you could possibly imagine. Like mom and dad married the whole time, making decent money. Like they went to church and they were raised right. And then those kids end up cracked out on the street. I've also known those kids who grew up in those environments, and they grow up and they're great people. And sometimes some of them grow up and they're not cracked out, but they're assholes to people. I've also known people who have been raised in horribly abusive situations, and some of them end up horribly abusing other people, and some of them end up not. So what's the reason behind that? Right? 2 kids raised in an identical home. One of them succeeds and one of them doesn't. Is it the home? Is it the environment? Or is it the choices and the decisions that that person makes that determines how that turns out? Well, I would speculate, and I think that evidence backs me up, is that it's the choices and the decisions, how that person responds to what happens to them determines the outcome more than anything else. Those explanations, those things that say, well, of course they turned out this way. They grew up in a poor home without a father. Well, great. I know that growing up in a poor home and without a father makes, like statistically, that makes you more likely to end up in prison and committing crimes. That's just statistics. But some of them don't. And what's the difference? What's the difference between that kid who grows up in a bad neighborhood without a father and ends up being a fine, upstanding citizen, multimillionaire entrepreneur, employing dozens, if not hundreds of people, and the one who was raised in that same environment without a father, who ends up selling drugs on the street and doing hard time? It's the choices and the decisions that they make. And so, like, you may get the idea that over the course of, as I tell these stories, you may get the idea that I think my ex-wife is a horrible, despicable person. I don't. She did some horrible, despicable things. She did some things that some people would consider to be unforgivable. I don't think that there are really very many unforgivable sins. Yeah. But I loved her. I married her. I loved her enough to marry her. Looking back, there were plenty of red flags that I probably could have and should have seen. I was blinded by emotion. I was blinded by a lot of things. And I loved her. That will never change. And then things changed over the course of our relationship and our marriage. Things that I did that weren't good, and things that she did that weren't good. We stopped working on things, right? And our marriage and our family went down a bad road. So, yeah, we had some things happen. We had several difficult things. We had a daughter that was born premature. I've talked about that. I made some bad business choices and decisions, and we were pretty broke at times. We had kids very close together. We had my sister-in-law move in with us with her daughter after getting out of an abusive relationship. And one thing compounded upon another. We didn't have many breaks from these things. It was one thing, and then another, and then another, and then another, and it eventually, our foundation was flawed. Our foundation was cracked, and my foundation was cracked, and it shattered over the course of time. And I lost all of my moorings. I lost all of my bearings. And so did she, because I lost mine, and I'm supposed to be the leader of the home, like she lost hers too. And so I take full responsibility for that. But even as I take full responsibility for that, that doesn't excuse her actions. That doesn't excuse the things that she did. Explanations are not excuses. She's got plenty of explanations, and so do I. I could give them to you right now. I could give you a whole long laundry list of things that would explain my behavior, that would explain why I did what I did. But the bottom line is that I did the things that I did. It doesn't matter why I did them. Yeah, I mean, on some level, as I deal with them, as I learn and as I grow, I should explore and look at those things, right? But we can sit here and we can spend days and days and days, hours and hours and hours, endless amounts of energy and effort, navel gazing, trying to figure out exactly why. Why did I do that? Right? But the bottom line is that we're still responsible for our behavior. All that time that we spend with all that inner work, all of those inner explanations, all those peeling back layers of the onion, eventually have to demonstrate changed behavior. Because if they don't, at some point, manifest in changed behavior, it's all pointless. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. We were talking about like the difference between doing all the inner work that you need to do, but also changing your behavior on the outside. And both of those things are important. You can't just change all the external stuff and then expect that the internal stuff to just change itself. It helps. It certainly helps. Right? But if you never work on the stuff on the inside and all you're doing is changing the stuff on the outside, eventually that stuff on the outside is going to revert back to the negative stuff. And if all you're doing is working on the stuff on the inside, great. So you understand, oh yeah, I'm an introvert and I have this and this and this and this attachment disorder. You know, like give yourself a gazillion labels. People like to label things. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I'm like, just change your behavior. Great. You're an introvert. You're an extrovert. You're a neurodivergent. You have depression. You have this or that mental illness, mental health, whatever. Cool. What are you going to do about it? It still has to manifest itself in changed behavior on the outside. At some point, it has to manifest itself in changed behavior on the outside. Right? And the best way is to do some of both at the same time. Yeah, do some of that deep inner work. But if you're doing all this deep inner work and it's not manifesting on the outside, it's not that what's going on the inside, what's going on the outside aren't congruent, right? Whereas if you're working on the inside and you're working on the outside at the same time, it develops a congruency so the internal you is agreeing with the external you. You're not having an argument. You're not having two different sides of yourself arguing with each other. As we were going through all this crazy shit with me and my ex-wife, like, she was going to counseling the whole time. She talked glowingly about how wonderful a counselor was. It wasn't really manifesting itself on the outside. There wasn't really a whole lot of changed behavior. And then she just got to the point where she's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. I'm done. I've dealt with it. I'm all healed from it. I don't need to worry about it anymore. Still wasn't manifesting on the outside. There still wasn't anything happening on the outside. So she would come home and be talking about how she discovered this thing out about her father or her grandfather, her mother, or whatever. I'm like, well, cool. But I'm all healed from it. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to deal with it anymore. I don't actually need to change my behavior now that I've identified where it comes from. I call bullshit on that, right? And so, like, I don't want to use, like I said, my wife had a pretty messed up childhood. Some pretty crazy stuff. And so if anyone had excuses to fall back into drugs and to do some of the things that she did, like, she had all the explanations in the world. But it still doesn't give her an excuse. It doesn't change the fact that there are consequences for your actions, regardless of why, regardless of the explanation why. You don't remove the consequences of actions. And eventually, over time, I learned how to face the consequences of my actions. I learned how to take responsibility for the things that I did. And yes, I identified some of those things from my past that got me to where I was, but I was able to change course. And as of the time of this recording, as far as I know, she has not changed course. I'm not going to speak a whole bunch to that. Right? She's had plenty of opportunities. Plenty of people reach out to her. Plenty of people try. So, don't let all that stuff that's happened to you dictate where you go from here. You can always change your behavior. It's just a matter of a few simple but not easy steps. And so I'd like to invite you, if you're one of those people, especially men who feel broken, who feel like there's no hope. I've been down the road that you're on, right? So if you want to talk, if you want to reach out, message me through one of my social media channels or send me a DM somewhere. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to just be there to talk with you. Men especially, but women too. I've talked with lots and lots of people. But there's nothing special about me. I've just been down the road. So I kind of know the way out. Yeah, so send me a message. I'd love to at least talk. Maybe say a prayer for you. I would like to ask too that you say a prayer for my wife, my ex-wife. She hasn't seen her kids since 2016. Pray for her. Pray for her heart. Pray that God apprehends her and that she's able to get her life turned around. She needs it. That's about all I got to say tonight. It's an emotional time of year for me with the holidays and missing my kids and missing my ex-wife and feeling a little lonely here and there, you know. I just want to be vulnerable, but I appreciate it, being able to have this outlet. And so I'd like to just once again ask, like, if you got anything out of this, give me a thumbs up, send me a comment, like my social media, reach out to me, say hi. All right, well, you all have a happy Thanksgiving. The day this drops, it'll be probably November 26th, which is my birthday. So you can wish me a happy birthday. I'm just kidding. But it is my birthday. Oh, Tuesday is my birthday. The 26th is my birthday. So happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you later. So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.